Hey everybody, we're doing another first chapters today. This is a young adult romance. It's called The Code for Love and Heartbreak by Gillian Cantor. It's kind of a geeky romance. It's pretty fun. The first chapter is preceded by a prologue, so I'm going to do the prologue and the first chapter today. It'll be a little bit long, but I think it'll be worth it. So we're going to start the prologue. I've always loved numbers a whole lot more than I love people. For one thing, I can make numbers behave any way I want them to. No arguments, no questions. I write a line of code and my computer performs a specific and very regulated task. Numbers don't play games or hide behind some nuance I've missed. I write an equation, then formulate a definitive and absolutely correct answer. And more importantly, numbers never leave me. I tell this to Izzy as she's sitting on her suitcase, trying to force it closed. Having just packed the last of her closet before leaving for her freshman year at UCLA, which is exactly 2,764 miles from our house in Highbury, New Jersey. A number which seems insurmountable, and which makes me think that after this day, Izzy's last one at home until Christmas break, we'll be more like two strangers floating across a continent from one another than sisters. Numbers, I say to Izzy now, are much better than people. You're such a nerd, Em, Izzy says, but she stops what she's doing and squeezes my arm affectionately, before finally getting the suitcase to zip. She's a nerd too, but not for numbers like me. For books. Izzy is running 2,764 miles away from New Jersey to read. To major in English at UCLA. Which is ridiculous, given she could have done the same thing at Rutgers or the College of New Jersey, or almost any one of the other 62 colleges in our state, any of which would have been within driving distance, so we could have seen each other on weekends. Izzy says she's going to California for the sunshine, but Dad and I both know the real reason is that her boyfriend John decided to go to UCLA to study film. Izzy chose John over me, and that part stings the most. I can't believe you're actually going, I say, and not for the first time. I've been saying this to Izzy all summer, hoping she might change her mind. But now that her suitcase is zipped, it feels like she's really leaving. And my eyes start to well up. I do love numbers more than people. Most people. Izzy and I are only 17 months apart, and our mom died when we were both toddlers. Dad works a lot, and Izzy and I have barely been apart for more than a night and as long as I can remember, much less months. She stops messing with her suitcase now, walks over to where I'm sitting on her bed, and puts her arm around me. I lean my head on her shoulder and breathe in the comforting scent of her strawberry shampoo one last time. I'm going to miss you too, Em, she says, but you're going to have a great senior year. She says it emphatically, her voice filled with enthusiasm that I don't believe or even understand. You really could stay, I say. You got into 2 colleges in New Jersey. This has been my argument to her all summer. I keep thinking if I say it enough, she really will change her mind. But even as I say it, I know it's probably too late for her to change anything for fall semester now, no matter how much I might want her to. And she just looks back at me with worry all over her face. Em, you know I can't. Can't or won't. I wipe my nose with the back of my hand, pulling away from her. She leaves me on her bed and goes back to her suitcase. She shifts it around, props it upright, and then looks back at me. You know what you need, she says, breathing hard from managing the weight of her entire life, crammed inside this giant suitcase. To get out there this year. Be more social, get some friends. Maybe even a boyfriend. A boyfriend. I half laugh, half sniffle at the ridiculousness of it. If you keep busy, you won't even notice I'm gone. She speaks quickly, excitedly. There's nothing Izzy likes more than a good plan, but this sounds terrible to me. Christmas will be here before you know it, she's still talking. Then next year, you'll be off to college too. Maybe that would be true for her, if I were the one leaving, and if she were the one staying here. If I were the older one, leaving for California first, Izzy would stay here, spend the year with John, and barely even notice my absence. Which is what I guess she's about to do at UCLA. But I've always needed Izzy much more than she's needed me. I hate being social, and I don't want a boyfriend, I say. And anyway, you know what the boys are like at our high school. No thanks. Mostly they're intimidated by me and my penchant for math. And I find their intimidation so annoying that I can barely even stand to have a conversation with them, much less a date. And the few that aren't, well, the one that isn't, George, is my equal and co-president of Coding Club. He also happens to be John's younger brother. We're something like friends, George and I. Or maybe not, because we don't really hang out outside of family stuff, school or coding club. And I guess in a way we're supposed to be rivals. One of us will for certain be valedictorian of our class this year. The other will be salutatorian. And knowing George, he's going to be more than a little bit annoyed when he's staring at my back during graduation. You love numbers so much and you're so good at coding, Izzy says now with a flip of her blonde curls over her shoulder. She wheels the suitcase toward her bedroom door and stops and looks back at me. You could always code yourself a boyfriend. She shrugs, then laughs a little, trying to make this moment lighter. I don't even crack a smile. That's a really ridiculous thing to say, I tell her. Thank God you're going to be an English major. But later, after it all fell apart, I would blame her. I'd say that it was all Izzy's fault. That she started the unraveling of everything with her once stupid offhand comment on the morning that she left me. Chapter 1. Okay, George says, tapping his fingers against the edge of his laptop in that annoying way he always does when I'm trying to think. We need to come up with something really good to win the state competition this year. It's after school on the first Friday of the year, and it's still way too hot outside even though it's almost mid-September. We're all sweating inside Highbury High, which was constructed of solid brick and sadly built long before central air. But coding club is my favorite thing about school, partly because I'm co-president this year along with George, and partly because last year we came in third in the state coding competition, and this year I really believe we can come in first. I also want to come up with something that will look good on my Stanford application. That's right. If Izzy can go to California for college, then I can too. And not for a boy either. I blow out my bangs in an attempt to lift them from my sweaty forehead and circulate some air. They're damp and barely move. George fans himself with the paper that has the deadlines for this year's competition. The air movement pushes his sandy blonde curls up, causing him to look more disheveled and overheated, not less. But George doesn't notice or care. He keeps on fanning himself. We just need to solve global warming, he says. Should be easy enough. A girl whose name I haven't learned yet giggles a little, and I shoot her a look to say, George is not funny. Don't encourage him. We have only 4 weeks to submit the application with our idea and proposal, and then get it ready for the regional competition in November. I don't want to waste any time. She's small, I'm assuming a freshman, and she's all curly red hair, which nearly covers her face more than frames it. She gives me a little shrug, and then glances back down at the competition guidelines, so all that's visible is her hair. Coding Club meets every Friday, even this very first one, and I'm excited to be back here, heat and all. The first week of school has felt interminably long and lonely without Izzy, and I've been looking forward to this meeting and starting our project. George, evidenced by the tapping of his fingers, is excited to be back too. Miss Taylor, our faculty advisor, not so much. She's staring out the window somewhere between bored, exhausted, and sweaty, and not paying much attention to us at all. We're a relatively small club, but we're dedicated. We've lost some members, a few graduated last year, and we've had a little attrition too. Philip decided to run cross-country instead this year, which really is fine by me, since he spent more time messing around on YouTube than working on code last year anyway. I looked down at the list of members in front of me and determined by process of elimination that the red-haired freshman must be Hannah Smith, as I already know the other girl on the list, Jane Fairfax. A junior who is sitting to my right and who always and unironically wears a lab coat as a fashion accessory. She's wearing one now, even though it is way too hot to wear any kind of coat. There are 2 boy names aside from George on the list, and I don't recognize either. Robert Martin and Franklin Churchill. Though, glancing around the table, one is clearly a very small, very nervous-looking freshman. The other looks older and maybe new to the school? He has olive skin, dark wavy hair, and bright green eyes that catch mine. Then he smiles. I look away. Miss Taylor, I say, clearing my throat. Should we do introductions for new members first? I remember now, probably 10 minutes later than I should have, that this is my duty as a senior and president of the club, to make sure everyone knows one another before we jump in. Miss Taylor has her gaze fixed out the window and doesn't seem to hear a word I'm saying to her. I stand and walk to the window to see what she's looking at. The only thing I see in the parking lot is my calculus teacher, Mr. Weston, sitting on the hood of a bright red Prius, talking on his phone. Miss Taylor, I say her name again, a little louder. What? She snaps her head around, seems to see and hear me for the first time. Oh, yes, right, Emma. State competition. Introductions first, though, George says kindly. She smiles at him and nods, and it's like no one even remembers that I've already said this. Sometimes it's frustrating to watch the way George seems to be just naturally better with people than I am. Of course, she says now, her gaze trailing back out the window again. George raises his eyebrows at me and shrugs. Okay, I'll go first, I say. I tell them only the basics, that I'm Emma Woodhouse, a senior club president, that I expect them all to treat this club with the utmost seriousness, and that my first choice for college is Stanford. Green Eyes whistles lightly under his breath like I've impressed him, and I'm annoyed to feel my face turning hot. I fan myself with the paper now in case anyone notices, and thinks it's any more than this heat. Honestly, it's not. You next, I say, meeting his eyes. He smiles again, and it feels like it's just at me, which makes my face feel even hotter. I'm Franklin Churchill III, which is the world's most pretentious name I know. And though I'm sure that's what it says on the sheet there, my middle name is Samuel, and everyone calls me Sam. I glance at George, who has gone back to fanning himself and looks bored, hot, and unimpressed. I just moved here, and I was in coding club at my old school, but we mainly messed around. Never entered any state competitions or anything like that. Welcome, George says, and I realize too late that I should have said that first. Then George jumps in and starts talking about himself. He mentions how his goal in life is to use technology to change the world, and I've heard it from him before. George is noble, maybe, much too idealistic, definitely. And I stop listening to him, turning my focus back to Sam. He looks away from George, smiles at me again. For some reason, I think about what Izzy said to me before she left, that part of what I need to make it through this year without her is a boyfriend. But it's a ridiculous thought. What I need is a brilliant idea for a state competition project. Something amazing enough that it will get us first place and help me get into Stanford. Numbers are better than people. And my senior year is going to be all about how numbers are going to help me ensure my future after high school. After the meeting ends, I drive George home. His parents let John take their third car out to LA. My dad, on the other hand, told Izzy she'd have to make it through at least her freshman year in California without the car, so I could use our second car for my last year of high school. Really, he doesn't have time to drive me around, and he knows Izzy has John out there. And though we never really sat down and discussed it, everyone seemed to assume that I could just drive George to and from school this year, and it would be fine. George likes to talk, and I don't, and I was worried that driving him would annoy me. But so far it hasn't. The nice thing about George, I've come to notice, is he doesn't talk just to hear the sound of his own voice. He usually only talks when he has something to say. Sam seems smart, George says to me now. I murmur, like I didn't notice Sam. I hope so. And he has experience, he says. Hannah and Robert will hopefully be quick learners. And we still have Jane, who really is amazing working with servers. Jane is never very friendly to me, and she always annoyingly acts like she's so much smarter and better than I am. But George is right about her. I'm good with algorithms, George with animation. Jane is amazing with the back end, and I'm glad we have her for that. I pull into George's empty driveway, and his 2-story brick colonial is pretty similar to mine, which is in a nearly identical subdivision 5 minutes farther from school, down Highbury Pike. The blinds are all pulled shut tightly, and I imagine the house is dark and empty inside. It's after 5, but his parents both work in Manhattan, and probably won't be home for hours. Dad only works 20 minutes away in Princeton, but he rarely ever makes it home before 8. My house is similarly dark and empty, and I sigh a little, thinking about Izzy on another coast, basking in her sunshine. With the 3-hour time difference, I wonder if she's even had lunch yet. You want to come in? George asks, as if he's contemplating the same thing I am. We can order a pizza, brainstorm some more. I'm about to say no because George and I don't usually hang out outside of school. Last year I would have gone home on Friday night after coding club, boiled pasta with Izzy, and argued over what to watch on Netflix until Dad got home, and then Izzy and John would go out to see a movie, and I'd go up to my room to work on coding or homework. Until this year, Izzy was not only my sister, but also my friend, my escape, and my best excuse. I never had to worry about who to talk to, or what to do, or where to go on weekends, because I had her. I didn't need anyone else. But this first week of school, going home every night to a dark, empty house, the quiet has unnerved me, and even working through my calculus equations and practicing piano hasn't calmed me down. I wonder if George has felt it too. I wonder if, unlike me, he has other friends, other people he hangs out with aside from John. But maybe that's not the same? And now, with our siblings on another coast and our workaholic parents always at work, George and I have something besides school and coding club in common. We're both stranded here in Highbury for one more year, just waiting for our real lives to begin. Yeah, sure, why not? I finally say. I like pizza. And I turn off the car and follow George inside his house. I've only been inside George's house a few other times before, most recently for John's graduation party last June, which Izzy forced me to attend with her. Then the house was packed with people I either didn't know or didn't like, and they all talked so much and so loud it made my head hurt. I told Izzy I was getting a migraine and had taken the car and left after an hour. But now the inside is so quiet I can hear the dull buzz of the refrigerator, the hum of the AC unit as I step inside. It reminds me, oddly, of the art museum in here. There's a large antique grandfather clock in the entryway, a formal glass dining set to my right, and to my left a very formal living room, with a large oriental rug and expensive-looking velour-lined couches. In contrast, our house is what Dad refers to as lived in. We still have the same blue reclining couch and love seat in our living room that Mom picked out before she died. And even though they're worn, I don't think Dad will ever get rid of them, which is fine with me. I'm afraid to touch anything, and I stand very still as George takes out his phone and orders a large pizza from Giuseppe's. Half mushroom and olive for me, half pepperoni for him. He knows my pizza preference without asking, from all the times we stayed late at coding club last year and ordered pizza in. And he never fails to make a face when he orders it, or comment on how mushrooms and olives only ruin a good pizza, while his pepperoni enhances it. He does it now, too. I shrug and say, agree to disagree, George. Agree to disagree. He shakes his head and shoots me a funny smile. I've been a vegetarian since 6th grade when I accidentally watched a documentary on slaughterhouses on the Discovery Channel. And that happened to be the year George and I first met, too, the first year of middle school. George finishes ordering and offers me a seat at the kitchen table, which is slightly less formal than the rest of the house. Just a plain oak table, much like the one in our kitchen at home. He gets his 2 glasses of water and hands one to me. I gulp mine down, not even realizing how thirsty I was. George refills it for me at the fridge and then sits down at the table with me. It really is way too hot today. And I was only half kidding about solving global warming, George says, pausing to drink his own water. I know you want to save the world, George, but we have 4 weeks to get a proposal together for this project. If you could figure out a way to solve global warming in 4 weeks, I think you'd win a Nobel Prize. And then who cares about the state competition? You would get a full ride to any college you want. He smiles, relenting that my logic has won over his ideals, for now. And then his whole face relaxes, making him look younger again, like the George I remember from 6th grade when we first met, when his family moved to Highbury and he joined my middle school mathlete team. He was shorter and skinnier than I was back then, and pretty quiet, too. So when he first joined the team as this small, slight new kid, I saw him as no threat at all, until he beat me out in the state level for the championship, and I realized for the first time that when it comes to numbers, I finally had a worthy opponent. Of course, now he's half a foot taller than I am, and he's not at all quiet anymore. He's still a worthy opponent, but ever since 6th grade, I've known to take him seriously. He hasn't beat me at anything since. We could always build another robot, he says now. That was our project last year, the brainchild of Brian and Daniel, the 2 seniors on our team. We built a robot and programmed her to play basketball in a 12x12 replica of a court. 2 of the presentation judges thought we were brilliant. The 3rd judge said, you can't really play basketball alone, not even if you're a robot. But to me, it seemed like a beautiful design, to figure out a way to play a team sport all alone. And it was pretty amazing to watch her roll down the court and shoot a basket, and to realize that we had programmed her to do that. We'd ended up in 3rd place, and I'm not sure we'd do any better this year, even if we programmed her to play a more solo sport. Besides, the robot was Brian and Daniel's. I want something that's mine, now that I'm a senior and club president. Well, mine and George's. We should do our own thing, I say. I just have to think of something no one else will think to do. George gets a half smile on his face, looks at me funny, then looks away. What? I say. He shakes his head. No, what? He puts his hand on my arm, and my first thought is that his fingers are warm, and my skin is cool now that we're inside and the AC is on. And my second is that I should pull away, because George and I aren't the kind of friends who touch each other's arms or hug or anything like that. Except for some reason I don't move. It's nothing, he finally says, It's just that you're not like anyone else, Emma. Of course you're going to think of something no one else will. I try to decide if that's an insult or a compliment or maybe somewhere in between. Just a solid fact. Then the doorbell rings and George pulls his hand away quickly, jumping up. Our pizza, he says. And as he runs to get it, I feel something weird in my stomach. Not hunger, exactly, and not the loneliness I've been feeling all week missing Izzy, but something else. Something I'm not sure I quite have the words to describe. That was the prologue and first chapter of The Code for Love and Heartbreak.